Well, thanks everybody for joining. Great to talk to you a little bit about what the team's been up to for the last few months, what we hope to get done in the next few weeks as well. First up, just introducing the hosts we have here. One is myself, a reformed web developer, or somebody who's sort of expired out of that into management. I was a co-founder of Tiny almost 20 years ago, and I've been in this sort of online text editing space ever since. Blake, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, thanks, Andrew. I'm Blake McAllister, the Director of Product Marketing here at Tiny. I've been in this role for about a year. Prior to that, I was a product manager here at Tiny for 2 years. And then before that, a decade plus of other product management roles and other digital and software companies. But very excited to be here and excited to be on the webinar today and talk to everybody about all things Tiny.
Great. And Lincoln.
Thanks. My name is Lincoln Dennis. I'm a support engineer here at Tiny. I've been here about 6 months. I have a web development background. And yeah, also excited to be here and chat with everybody.
Okay, great. Well, let's go back here to a little bit about who is Tiny. We've had a 20-year track record of helping developers build beautiful user experiences for content creation. So we're really at this intersection of users creating content and developers building experiences for them to be able to create content. So about 1,200 product teams are actually paying customers of Tiny. That's how we afford to do all the open source work that we do, which we're very fortunate to have. We have 50 team members spread from Australia, San Francisco, and Sweden. Very distributed team, and some remote people as well, like Dennis is in Colorado, Lincoln rather. So 4 years since the merger of eFox and MoxieCode. So these were two companies that were sort of pioneers in the online editing space, and we got together in 2015 and have been working to, and hence rebranded the company as Tiny. Our customers vary from Fortune 500 companies like Visa or CVS Health to, technology startups like SalesLoft or Drift or Encino or many fast-growing quasi-unicorn style companies. And then, of course, many other product teams who might be just getting a startup off the ground or inside an organization building some sort of internal application. So now we'll move on to a little bit about what we've been up to for the last 3 months. What we hope to cover in this meeting is, well, first of all, actually I'll explain these little photos I added here, is that we would call it the spring update, but a lot of our team are actually down under, so it's autumn for them. So I think we needed to be fair and equitable here and show the change of seasons on both sides of the hemisphere. But we've done a lot of work on TinyMCE Core, the premium features that our paying customers get, TinyDrive, which is a new file management UI component we've been working on, plugin directory, which is now live on the website, and we'll dive into it from there. So TinyMCE Core, this is the main project that is up on GitHub and available for you to integrate into your project pretty much free of charge if you're a developer. It has a lot of code which helps normalize content editable for folks. Content editable is an API that is provided by the browser, but is very unreliable between browsers. So what we do is provide a layer that just gives you a very clean API to work with, and you can then execute a whole bunch of editing commands from there. Obviously, a whole wrapper of UI components from drop-downs and menus and status bars and full screen views and buttons and all sorts of things that we have, color pickers that we've done. That was all reinvented as part of TinyMCE 5, which came out earlier this year. And then a bunch of integrations so that you can use this inside your project very easily. We also have 44 core plugins as part of the open source version. They include a bunch of things that often have dialogues or their own APIs for doing things on top of Tiny, so that you can keep that sort of core very lightweight and add things onto it if you want. Licensing, you can choose to use it as a free open part of the free open source, or we have a free tier on our cloud version as well. What we ask in return is that you give us some product attribution, a little powered by Tiny, so that you can help participate in driving growth around the Tiny platform, as well as only access to community support, which would mean Stack Overflow or similar. We do have paid subscriptions, which give you a commercial license. It is dual licensed, as well as premium support for that core Tiny library there as well. Q2 was super busy. It takes a team to build Tiny these days. It's a very substantial product, and we had over 13 individual contributors contribute code to the open source core, which we're very happy to. Many of them work for Tiny, but also some community members actually contributed patches during the quarter. That resulted in 52 bug fixes, over 24 new features. You can refer to the change log and release notes there that the team's done a very good job of keeping up to date. One of the things that we brought back in TinyMCE Core was the ability to have multiple toolbars. This was a feature of version 4 that we had not yet implemented in TinyMCE 5. Part of this was philosophical. We thought that a single toolbar was a better user experience, and we've introduced some features to enable you to use a single toolbar, and we'd probably still recommend that. But obviously, a lot of people had multiple toolbars and do have good reasons for having multiple toolbars in their application. So that is now been something that's been reintroduced this quarter into TinyMCE 5, so you can have arrange the buttons on your toolbar just however you like. One of the features we've introduced for enabling you to have a single row of buttons more easily is the toolbar drawer. This was inspired by tools like Google Docs, but even Microsoft Office has similar things to this these days. Floating is probably the more trendy style that's out there. But we have also implemented something called a sliding style, which would push the content down. So again, as you work with your designers on your product team, you can figure out what user interface, what user experience makes the most sense for your project. We have a word count API, so if you wanted to be able to determine, how many characters, how many words are in the content of TinyMCE, you can interface with the word count plugin at an API level, not just a user interface level. There is a user interface that people can see to see, whether for the word count or character count for the entire document or the selection as they drag and drop as a user has selected part of the document. Regardless, these things are now available via the API. If you wanted to implement some sort of counter on the page, you would be able to access it through that. Something else is now available in TinyMCE 5 is to be able to embed an iframe into a dialogue. So if you had a custom media picker, would be a good example, maybe a custom hyperlink picker. Very often you're going to write that code separate to TinyMCE, maybe using your own UI library or UI components, and then want to be able to integrate that into Tiny. One of the easiest way to do that is with an iframe now. Essentially, you can just pass a URL to Tiny, and it'll open up in a nice sort of light boxed dialogue. The user would be able to perform the action they need to, and then insert content or do other actions back to Tiny from there. What we're showing here was a great blog that one of our community members, Marty Friedel, wrote. Really wonderful article he published. So there will be a link to this that we will share around, and you'll be able to go in there. And please, I might say that as we go through this, please post any questions that you've got, and we'll certainly get to them as we go through the rest of this presentation. Putting it all together, this is just a quick animated GIF of what I was just talking about, is that you could implement a button that opens a new dialogue. You'll get a dialogue with bringing up the web app or web page that you've built. You can then use JavaScript to call back and insert content into the editor or perform actions like bolding the content. So hopefully that makes some sense. There is a GitHub profile, GitHub repository that Marty has up there as well with the code for this particular example. So check it out. Coming very soon in TinyMCE, in either July, August, or September, we have a sticky toolbar feature planned, so that if you are implementing TinyMCE to take over more of your UI, that you want, the ability for your content authors to write in a very open, free environment, the sticky toolbar will sort of pin itself to the top of the browser as you scroll down. A new mobile UI, so that is upgrading all of our UI components, which were brand new earlier this year, to be fully responsive, to work on with all of the quirks that are in the mobile world in terms of native keyboards popping up, being in the right location, to be able to select menus in a way that makes sense on a mobile. All of that work is ongoing right now, and really excited to bring that out a little bit later this month. I believe a lot of that is actually being contributed to Master on GitHub, so you could check it out there and give us any feedback. We also have a new tech writer who joined us this week. So we're looking to implement a ton of improvements to the docs. You can never have good enough docs in our case, and it's something we're always getting a lot of feedback for. So if you ever have any issues with docs, please open an issue on GitHub or let us know, and we'll get to that as soon as we can. All right, I'm going to hand over to Blake now to talk a little bit about some of the premium features that we have for TinyMCE's the paying customers that surround that open source core as well. So, Blake.
All right, terrific. Go ahead. Yeah, here we go. So just like Andrew did, a quick baseline of what the core editor means. Just, again, these premium features and plugins, this is paid functionality that can extend the core functionality that we discussed earlier. You can see all of our premium features and plugins there on the screen in front of you. It's a healthy list. It's a growing list, as we'll talk about a little bit later. And even though we have built out a lot of this premium functionality, Andrew's mentioned reaching out to us in terms of if there's documentation you'd like to see worked on. If there's premium features out there that you want to see in TinyMCE, please let us know, and we'll provide some ways to get in touch with us here at the end of the webinar. The big addition to our roster of premium features in Q2 was the skins and icon packs feature. Now, as the title of the feature suggests, this is a quick and easy way of giving you some ready-made skins and icon packs just to quickly differentiate your TinyMCE UI just a bit. We're going to show you some examples of this in a second, but first I want to talk about the why we made this feature. And to do that, I need to go back a little bit in time to February when we released to TinyMCE 5. Now, one of the things we were most excited about in TinyMCE 5 was the fact that we had moved from a very, very JavaScript-heavy approach in the TinyMCE 4 UI, and when we shifted to TinyMCE 5, that UI was rebuilt from the ground up using best practices of modern CSS. So what that means for our developers, for our designers, is that it's now much easier for anyone to get into those 300 plus variables, design variables that make up the TinyMCE UI, and really customize it to your heart's content. That said, not everybody may have the time or the inclination or the money to go in and look at every single one of those 300 variables, right? So for people who wanted to do something to differentiate their UI, make it a little custom, we wanted to offer these skins and icon packs. And you see there on the bottom of the screen, we're going to save you some time, we're going to save you some money, and ultimately leave you pretty happy. So let's take a look at some examples. So first, this is something, a TinyMCE specific skin and icon pack working together. It's a smaller one. One of the things, pieces of feedback we got from TinyMCE 5 was that some of our users felt that the default icon set was a little bit on the larger side. So we wanted to bring in some smaller icons for those users. And in addition, we provided a skin that's smaller overall. So if you want an editor that takes up a little bit less space in your application, this would be an excellent skin for you to work with.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in there, Blake, and say I didn't know too much about icon design, but you actually need to have the SVGs for the icons coded to the particular size of the icons, so that they look the best possible thing. So it's not a matter of taking something that was designed for 24 by 24 pixels and sizing it down to 16 by 16, you actually want to have icons that were specifically designed for 16 by 16. So anyway, you're always learning something. So.
Absolutely. So next, we have a couple different skins that are inspired by the material design system that comes from our good friends at Google. Their material design library is available for React, for Angular, for Vue. Very popular, only growing in popularity. For instance, the React library for material design that gets downloaded about 3 million times a month. We have a couple different flavors of material design. Here we have the classic view, and then we've also provided an outline view as well. Now next, just as Google, of course, has their own design system, so does Microsoft. Theirs is called Fabric. And just as Google uses material design across their suite of products, so does Microsoft. So look, if you're building an application that you think may ultimately one day integrate with Google or may one day integrate with Microsoft, right, here are two great ready-made skins to help you get your application looking and feeling just like the Google or Microsoft products that come directly from them. Another very popular framework that's out there is Bootstrap. And we provided a skin for Bootstrap as well. Chances are, if you're on this webinar or listening to it, you are very familiar with Bootstrap, an extremely popular front-end library that was spun out of Twitter. It's been around since 2010, so it has a good head start on material design and Fabric, and you can see that in its popularity. And you can see they're used on 18 million websites and growing. There's a couple icon packs too. That we've brought. One is these jam icons. This is a really popular third-party library. It's almost 900 icons. Pretty much anything you can dream up needing an icon for, you'll be able to find it in this library. You can see on screen, it's a little bit different, kind of quirky, kind of fun. We really like it, and so we wanted to include it here. And one really cool thing about this icon pack, and really any of the icon packs and skins you're seeing, is that these can all be mixed and matched to create something even more a little unique, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I might add that given that they're such broad libraries, the Material UI, for example, the Jam icon set is that hopefully you can find icons that match any custom toolbar buttons or similar things that you need in your application as well. So that's certainly been part of the theory of what we're doing here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then finally, the last one in terms of the skins and icon packs to talk about is the no border. This is great for anyone who wants to use the editor in full screen mode, or perhaps you have your own custom borders that you want to wrap the editor with. So here's, again, a ready-made skin that makes it much easier for you to do just that. The other big news in Q2 around our premium features was the release of PowerPaste 5.0. A new major release of PowerPaste, which is pretty exciting. Some of the big improvements here were that we've added support for cropped images. It used to be if you were working in Microsoft Word and you cropped an image and then pasted that into TinyMCE, the cropped part of the image was not retained and the original image was shown in your editor. So we've now resolved that issue. And so cropped image support has been added to PowerPaste 5.0. We've also removed legacy Flash support. It's not needed since all of our supported browsers can now allow JavaScript access to the clipboard. So we've been able to streamline PowerPaste 5.0, streamline the code base a bit, which is always nice. If you're a cloud user of PowerPaste, your plugin's already been updated on the terrific benefits of cloud. If you're a self-hosted user, you will need to go and download the latest version. If you're not quite sure where to find that download, please reach out to our support team, and we'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Finally, in terms of what the roadmap looks like around our premium features, we'll be taking our advanced code editor and bringing it in line to the use of the editor. Those of you that are familiar with advanced code editor, you know that today, when you invoke it, it pops up in its own modal window. We'll be bringing that advanced code editor in line. We'll be adding a new skin inspired by Google Docs, which is just a bit different from material design. We'll be adding some advanced table functionality, such as the ability to drag and drop table rows and columns. And we'll also be bringing a Tiny Export plugin to market with the ability to download your content into a number of different formats. You can see a few there on the screen in front of you. Again, want to add, please reach out to us if there are skins, if there are icon packs, if there are file formats you want to see included in the Tiny Export plugin. Again, please drop us a line and let us know. And with that, I will hand it back over to Andrew, who's going to talk to us about TinyDrive a bit.
Great. Excellent. So something that we're trying to think about as a team, as a company, is how do we broaden out from TinyMCE? And one of those first steps we've made is around a great new file manager and image upload component that you can embed in your application called TinyDrive. So the whole idea here is to be a best-of-breed tool for doing file management and uploading. There are so many edge cases and features that you could build into a file management tool. When we talk to developers, they find that they might just do the bare minimum. When you get on board with TinyDrive, you'll be able to have a much richer user interface that obviously is supported and maintained by us. If you to incorporate into your app, so it works seamlessly with TinyMCE. So if you're embedding images or trying to attach files in content with TinyMCE, it'll work easily with that. Most of the magic in TinyDrive is in the front end. It's like a JavaScript library, if you like, but we have it available on cloud with some integrated storage. So you can get half a gig of storage free from us, as well as bandwidth, a gig of bandwidth. That's all powered by AWS. And you can talk to us about getting additional storage or bandwidth. One of the things that we've introduced this quarter for TinyDrive is the ability to use it outside of TinyMCE. So to be able to have what you're seeing in the demo here is to be able to pick media from the file manager and insert it into a form field, which is super cool. Other things that we've done is the ability to select files from external services like Google Drive or Dropbox to import that into your quote-unquote TinyDrive. As we mentioned, most of this is about the front end, so we are looking at opening up the back-end storage options. But check it out; it's a nice streamlined way for people to bring in files from third parties such as Dropbox and Google Drive. One of the things that we found is that when you integrate file management into your application, you need to take care of authentication, and we use something called JWT, which is great, but left people scratching their head if they needed to implement that from scratch. So we now have some starter packs available as repositories that you can clone from GitHub that work in Node, PHP, Java, and .NET. Get on there and download them. You'll be able to just as a very simple place to put in your JWT icon, API key, and that'll get you up and running a lot easier than trying to do all that stuff from scratch. Coming soon in TinyDrive, it is still a lot of work going into it, which is great. You'll be able to preview PDFs and videos. This is a great example of a feature that you would perhaps struggle to find the time to implement yourself, but if you jump on board with us, that'll just come out of the box. We'll enable you to introduce your own backend, either something from S3, Azure, or potentially build your own entire custom backend, just writing to making a JSON API available to the TinyDrive component so that users can browse, select, update, upload, that sort of stuff. Some integrations with the popular frameworks, that's always been popular with TinyMCE, so it's something we'll look at doing for TinyDrive. And finally, the ability to actually install the JavaScript packages via NPM or self-host them, so that in theory, you will be able to use TinyDrive without any dependency on our cloud backend and host it all yourself. So if anything there sounds of interest, let us know. That would be great. Something that Blake has been personally involved in is the plugins directory, so I'm going to hand over back to him to talk about that.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Andrew. So as you can see on the screen in front of you, we've recently released a new plugins directory on the website. Prior to this, you had to go to one part of the website to look at our core plugins. You had to go somewhere else to look at our premium plugins, and yet another place to look at offerings from our technology partners. We've now pulled all those together in one place. It's obviously more convenient for you. If you look on the screen, the left side of the screen, we've included in the left rail, there's a search dialog. You can filter by category when it comes to plugins. You can also filter by functionality. So aside from being nice and easy one-stop shopping, we hope it actually helps you work faster and become more productive, since you now have just one place to look for everything, just a quick and easy reference guide for what's available for you for TinyMCE. Next, I had mentioned that we are including our technology partners as part of the plugin directory. I just wanted to talk a bit about those. Technology partners that we have. You know, TinyMCE as the world's most popular WYSIWYG text editor, right? It makes sense that there are other companies out there building really excellent plugins for the editor. You can see some of those examples here. We have third-party plugins for real-time collaboration, for interactive charting, for equation editing, for dynamic email content. Really cool stuff. And in Q2, we added a new technology partner to our roster, and this company is called Loop Index. And there on the next screen, you can see they have made two plugins for Tiny, one for track changes and one for inline comments. There's a screenshot of the track changes functionality there in front of you. You may be saying to yourself, well, doesn't TinyMCE also make its own commenting plugin? And yes, we do. But we're certainly happy for Loop Index to bring theirs to the table. We encourage you to check out both and pick the one that's right for you. Ultimately, we want happy users, so again, whatever works. Back over to Andrew to talk a little bit about our Tiny Product Week, which took place at Q2.
Great, thanks, Blake. Something I wanted to talk a little bit more about is being a little bit more transparent about who Tiny is and what we do. One of the fun things that we do every year, it's been a tradition for 2 years now, so is that we bring together our very distributed team into the offices we have down in Brisbane, Australia, and essentially do a 1 week long hackathon. So you see some of the team hanging out there. We get together on a whiteboard. We try and mix the teams up. So there's people from Sweden or Australia or the US all sort of working together on this. Do some rapid prototyping, work with the TinyMCE APIs ourselves, which gives us some great feedback on what is good and what could be improved. And then at the end of the week, we present it and have some fun times whilst we're doing it as well. So the output of some of these things ends up finding their way to Tiny Labs, which is, you can find a link to that in the footer of the Tiny website there. Two things from last year were Tiny Sheets and a configurator. Tiny Sheets sort of gives you spreadsheet-like formulas inside regular tables inside TinyMCE. And then we have two things from this year, which is a Markdown and a media search tool, which are pretty cool. The Markdown tool has a sort of a split screen interface. So on one side, you can be typing plain text Markdown style things. And on the other side of the screen, it'll show up a rich text WYSIWYG kind of view. And you can edit in either panes, and you'll see either Markdown being created in real time, or as you type Markdown, you'll see the WYSIWYG rich text view being updated as well. So that's pretty neat, and actually something that we'd like to bring out as a plugin for people to use. So if you think this could be of use to you, let me know. And media search, which lets you go and find publicly accessible media files, so videos, images, GIFs, whatever you want to be able to use. We hook into some public domain search type stuff, such as Giphy or Pexels, so that your content authors would be able to find some inspired images or videos to insert into whatever they're creating. So again, we thought that was pretty cool. We would enter keyword and search out with things, and that actually helped drive the development of some of the UI components that you can use in your own plugin as well. So go check them out. If this is something you'd like to see made a reality, send us an email. Also like to do a quick plug for Product Week next year. Is we're already started planning for that, is to join along. We'd love to have some folks from the community, from customers, join us in Product Week, participate in some of the hackathons and learnings around the code base, actually make some contributions there. So mark your calendar. Let us know if you're interested, and we'd be happy to send you information. This would be a much more intimate affair than your typical conference, and a whole lot of fun down under in Brisbane, Australia. So please mark your calendar and let us know. All right then. So that's the extent of our prepared content there. So we have plenty of time for questions here. So fire away if you have any questions, and I'll turn over to Lincoln here, who's been monitoring to see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. We do have a couple here. Let's see, here's our first one. First question we have is, you talked about removing multiple toolbars in Tiny5 and then adding them back in. Why did you remove them in the first place?
So we thought there was a good case to be made about not cluttering the user interface. We've seen a lot of deployments of TinyMCE where they have multiple toolbars. Joomla is in fact one of them. And we'd prefer a more modern, streamlined user interface, as many design-oriented folks do these days. But clearly that doesn't suit every implementation. I mean, particularly inline, it made sense perhaps just to have a more compact set of toolbars by having them have 2 rows. So based upon community feedback, there was a lot of discussion on GitHub. We decided to bring multiple toolbars back, and here they are.
Great, awesome. All right, we have another question here. We mentioned our new word count API, but we were wondering if there are any other new APIs that might be available for developers to use.
That's a good question. I'll take that one again. I'll tell you what, instead of an API that might be coming out, I'll tell you about an API that's already available. We didn't include it in our presentation today, but we recently made available an editor mode API. And what I'll do is when we circulate the slides in the follow-up email from this webinar, I'll make sure to include a link to the documentation. But Andrew had mentioned that Advanced Code Editor is going to be moving inline in an upcoming release, and the editor mode API is what will allow the Advanced Code Editor to appear inline. Right now, one of the other things you can use the API for is to set the editor into a read-only mode. And of course, I'm sure in our audience, the developers, they can take a look at the API documentation and come up with lots of other cool use cases as well. So yeah, good question. Editor mode API is a new one to definitely check out. And yeah, we'll include the link to the documentation in that when we send around the follow-up email.
Great. All right. That was awesome. That looks like questions we have submitted here. So I will pass it back to you, gentlemen.
All right. Terrific. Thanks, Lincoln. Thanks to the webinar participants that asked a couple questions. Again, you can follow us on Twitter there at JoinTiny. Please reach out to us at team@tiny.cloud with any follow-up questions about anything you heard today. Any recommendations around the skins and icon packs that you'd like to see added in the future, documentation you'd like to see us take a look at, any of your thoughts on Tiny Labs, or anything at all, please drop us a line. Otherwise, on behalf of Lincoln, on behalf of Andrew, thank you very much for joining today, and look for a follow-up email from us with the slides from this presentation in the next day or so. All right, thanks again.
Great. Thank you.